Wild West adventurers, welcome back to part 2 of Doc Holliday, the life and legend. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell button for notifications. Let's enjoy the show. You're a daisy if you do.
You're a daisy if you do.
Hey, Wild West adventurers. In our last episode, we talked about Doc Holliday's boyhood in Georgia. So if you haven't seen that, please go on back and search for part 1 of Doc Holliday's life and legend. When we left off, he had arrived in Tombstone, Arizona. Many people are familiar with the gunfight at the OK Corral and its aftermath, although they may not know the true story. We are not going to cover that at this time. We are going to do a special episode on the gunfight at the OK Corral, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell button to receive notification. So Doc Holliday left Tombstone in the first part of 1882. First, he went to New Mexico. He wasn't there long. He moved on to Colorado, and he was in Denver, Colorado on May 15, 1882. We know he was in Denver because he was arrested for the murder of Frank Stillwell, which had occurred back in Tucson, Arizona earlier that year. As authorities were preparing to extradite Holliday back to Arizona, his old friend, Bat Masterson, who was then the chief of police at Trinidad, Colorado, stepped in and drew up some trumped-up charges on Holliday in order to keep him in Colorado. And of course, because he is Doc Holliday, that was not the last time he saw the inside of a jail cell. He was arrested on July 14, 1882, on larceny charges. His last violent charge happened in early part of 1885. Doc Holliday had borrowed a sum of money from Billy Allen. Billy Allen was a bartender at Hyman's Saloon in Leadville, Colorado.
Eventually, Allen realized he was never going to see that $5 again, so he began threatening Holliday. Holliday caught wind of this, he armed himself, and he showed up at Hyman's Saloon and shot Billy Allen in the arm.
Allen didn't die, but Holliday was arrested for attempted murder. He was acquitted, though, on March 28, 1885, since, as he claimed, he was only defending himself against the heavier and brawnier Allen.
After this business with Allen in Leadville, Doc Holliday moved on to Denver. He was staying at the Windsor Hotel in late winter of 1886. This was the last time that he and his old friend Wyatt Earp met up. Sadie Marcus, who was Wyatt Earp's common-law wife, described Holliday as skeletal, having a continuous cough, and standing on unsteady legs. In late spring to early summer of 1887, Holliday would move from Denver on to Glenwood Springs. This, as it turned out, would be the last move he would ever make. Some sources say that he chose Glenwood Springs because he hoped that the curative powers of the hot springs would help his tuberculosis. However, at this stage of his illness, he was probably so sick and his body so racked with consumption, he really went there to die, and he knew he was going to be taking his last breaths in just a few short months. Now, here's where the story of Doc Holliday gets weird. Most sources say that he checked into the Hotel Glenwood, and that it was at Hotel Glenwood that he took his last breath, having asked a nurse for a shot of whiskey before looking down at his bare feet and muttering, "This is funny." However, unless I'm missing something, hotels don't come with nurses. So perhaps Hotel Glenwood was more of a hospital/rehabilitative center, or perhaps he was staying in something more hospital-like. A few sources call the place where he died the Glenwood Springs Sanitarium. Now keep in mind, a sanitarium back then was a place you would go for long-term illness like tuberculosis, not necessarily for mental illnesses. Now the official record shows that Doc Holliday was buried at Linwood Cemetery, which overlooks Glenwood Springs. In fact, a tombstone has been erected there that pays homage to the legendary gunfighter. However, there is another monument at the cemetery that simply says he's buried someplace at the cemetery. And in fact, the informational sign at the cemetery states that because of the popularity of Doc Holliday and the legend of Doc Holliday, the city of Glenwood Springs erected a tombstone to Doc Holliday as a way to bring business to Glenwood Springs. Some modern theorists purport that in November of 1887, the ground would have been either too hard to dig a grave, or the road to the cemetery would have been too icy to transport Holliday's remains up to Linwood Cemetery. Instead, these theorists say that perhaps his body was buried on the premises of the location where he died, be that the sanitarium or Hotel Glenwood, or in a neighboring area. These theorists claim that since it had been a temporary holding spot, they wouldn't have put a monument up, and that perhaps his body has been forgotten about over the years. So some claim his body may be in the backyard of some home in Glenwood Springs. Wouldn't want to dig that one up, or maybe I would. Still others claim that Holliday's father, who he had been estranged from for several years, actually came out to Colorado and took his son's body back with him to Georgia. They claim that he buried his son in an unmarked grave, and that he himself, later on when he passed, is buried next to him. And if you see this picture here, the fine people of Griffin, Georgia have actually erected a sign saying that it is Doc Holliday's final resting place, with a question mark, of course, because no one really knows where Holliday is buried, and that's the mystery of Doc Holliday's grave.
That brings us to the end of our two-part Doc Holliday series. I hope you enjoyed this, and I want to know, where do you think Doc Holliday is buried? Colorado, Georgia, or somewhere else entirely? I look forward to reading your comments down below. Remember, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and hit that bell button to receive notifications. See you later, Wild West Adventures!